And welcome to episode 50 of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Who'd have thought we got as far as half a century's worth of podcasts? So, welcome. And on tonight's programme, what we're going to be looking at is, with me one sec, and nope, not that one. Already up to yes, that one. So I'm going to be talking about a couple of photos I put together using a very large softbox and a second-hand bookshop in Wigtown. Also coming up, we've had a couple of photos, well, 4 photos put into the critique section. So we have VG has been playing around with water droplet photography. Been having huge fun with that, but he's wanting to get a few more tips and tricks and understand the relationship a bit better between the flash and the shutter speed. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Robert, during winter in Texas, and the unusual snow, was out with his camera, took this photo, quite like the decay aspect of it, but was kind of unsure what to do with the editing, whether there's ways he could play with it or not. So we're going to chat a little bit about that. Ben Tito put in this photo where he was going for a very sort of specific idea, wanted to sort of have any ideas on editing with that. He'd been playing with some editing ideas and wondered if there was anything extra that could be done. And Roy had recreated a photo from an analog version, an old film version that he'd done many years ago. As well as looking for a bit of feedback on the photo, he was also curious as to ways you can maybe use your digital camera to digitalize, old prints. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. So that's what we've got coming up tonight. So here we are, live on Facebook. Leave me a comment. Let me know you're here. If this is your first time here, let me know where you're from as well, because it's always really interesting to know where in the country or the world people are tuning in from. If you find these podcasts useful or interesting, do please consider buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres to help support the podcasts. It's not compulsory, but it is always appreciated. Oh, and while I remember, it's Robert's birthday today, so happy birthday, Robert. Cool. Okay, so let's, I'll just do a little, close those windows there and see if we've got any comments. Oh, yep, looks like we've got people in already. Brilliant. So Stacey is saying good afternoon. So Stacey's in Pennsylvania. Lovely to see you back, Stacey. Maggie says good evening everyone. Ben Craven says greetings all. Rosie from Wigtown, Whithorn rather, says hello Kim and everyone. Shashi, oh, a new visitor, welcome Shashi, says hello. And WRU, is that where are you? Well, I'm in Scotland, so in the UK. So if you can let us know where you are, that would be great. Benedito says good evening. Brian from Dumfries says hi Kim and all who are watching, and looking forward to another interesting night. Sandra says hi everyone. Sandra from Birmingham. Roy says hi everyone. Robert says howdy everyone from Texas. Rosie says has everyone else got sound? Yeah, well, I'm hoping everybody else says. Oh, Ben says I've got sound. Jill says yes. So that's good. Okay, Rosie, just you. April says hello, everyone. Jill says hi, everyone. Pat says made it. So glad you could make it, Pat. Stacey says happy birthday, Robert. Shashi says I'm in India. Well, welcome. Yeah, it's quite late there. I must be about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning even, I think. VG won't be in tonight, but she's from India, regular regular contributor to the podcasts. Marie from South Africa says hi. Rosie's changed her headphones so she can hear now. And Becca says, good evening all. Well, fantastic. We've got a good team in tonight. Brilliant. Cool. So, welcome everyone. And here we are. Episode 50. Just in time for Robert's birthday. It's a strange thing. When I started these, and in 3 weeks' time, that will be exactly a year ago. We'll be hitting the anniversary of since these podcasts started. When I started them, I kind of had the feeling that, well, I do it for about 3 months and see how I got on. Not entirely sure whether I would continue or not. By the time I got to 3 months, I thought, well, okay, we'll keep it going a little bit longer. And by the time I got to 6 months, I was kind of well embedded. And now I can't imagine giving them up unless there was a compelling reason. So, what else have we got here? Okay, Shashi is saying, sir, please your number. Okay, not entirely sure what you mean by that. This is a live podcast. Jackie says, hello, it's Jackie from South Africa. Oh, Jackie, great. So Jackie from South Africa is in live tonight. Now, Jackie doesn't normally manage to make it in. She's a regular watcher of the viewers, regular contributor to the podcast. So lovely that you could make it, Jackie. I know it usually interferes with your kind of sleeping time. So I think you said something about setting the alarm to see if you could tune in for this one. Really glad you could make it. Sandra says happy birthday, Robert. Oh, John Harvey's here as well, says hello, Kim, and all from Columbus in Ohio. Great. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to talk a little bit about this photo in from Wigtown. So let me just open. Well, okay, I'll talk a little bit about, first of all, I'll talk a little bit, first of all, about Wigtown. Essentially what I did was I did a shoot at a second-hand bookshop called The Open Book in Wigtown. Now, Wigtown is a small town about 50 miles or so from Castle Douglas. And it's got a population of about 900 people. So not particularly big. However, it hosts the book festival. Wigtown Book Festival is one of the largest art events in Scotland. It's always big. End of September, beginning of October. Usually a 10-day event. Last year was the first time online, as such, obviously because of the whole COVID thing. And I've been sort of involved on and off with Wigtown. But one of the great things about it is, despite the fact that it's only got a population of 900 people, it's also got 13 second-hand bookstores. A lot of the second-hand bookstores are also and something else, so they might be a cafe with also a second-hand bookstore attached to them, or a gift shop with second-hand bookstore part of it. But it also includes the largest second-hand bookstore in Scotland, just called the bookshop. And it's now the what became really interesting was the Open Book, which is one of them, is in fact actually also an Airbnb. So you can hire this place, you can rent this place for a week. It's a little flat above the shop, and you can be a second-hand bookstore owner or runner. Run your own for the week. You can arrange the displays, put on special offers, and do what you want. You've got the run of the place for the week. And people from all over the world it's become so popular. It's sort of like one of Airbnb's sort of most sought after destinations. Unfortunately, again, COVID has kind of interfered with it a little bit. But up until it was certainly booked solid for 3 years ahead. And it would have been booked solid way beyond that, except for the fact Airbnb only goes 3 years ahead. But it's got a waiting list of, for which if everybody on it was serious, then, another 10 to 15 years worth of waiting list there for you as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting place. Now I ended up doing a few photos there. Part of an idea to help promote the place. Part of it was to even sort of give suggestions to people who might be, give ideas so that if anybody was going and doing an Airbnb there, whether they might want to do a fancy photo shoot while they were there. I suppose the thing is with a bookshop, if I had to just choose one venue to create really interesting fantasy style photos, then I can't think of many things better than a second-hand bookshop. So many options you can do with them. And now I did several, about half a dozen different kinds of photos while I was there in one very long day. I'm not going to go through all of them tonight, but I'm going to show you a couple. And one of them was this one. And like I said, so basically what you've got here is this. You've got a woman in a white dress, wedding dress, staring at a large book. There's this sort of curved notion of the bookcases. I did that in the editing. So it's sort of drawing you into this sort of strange world. It's all a bit misty, all a bit strange. And then in the background, you've got a wee girl reading a book as well. So although when I took the photo, I didn't actually know that it was going to be a super large book that Sarah was going to be standing in front of. What I did was I set this up so that there was a large softbox. So let me show you. This is one of the kind of pre-photo, this is what I was sort of working out what I was going to do. So you can see there's this large softbox that I've got. It's about 6 foot tall and 3 or 4 feet wide. And it's about, I don't know, 2 foot thick. And what you do is you stick your strobes or your flashes inside the softbox, and then it creates this beautiful diffuse light. Now it's about the size of a door, and the idea was that I wanted to kind of create like a portal to another world. And I didn't exactly know what that portal would be at this point, but there was a gap in the bookcase. If you look at the way the books were coming down here, there was a gap up here which enabled me to sort of place the softbox there and then light up Sarah with it. Now, if we move on to, this is the original photo. I also used a little burst of a smoke machine to create a kind of little, you can see, so you can kind of feel a sort of sense of atmosphere coming out of the portal. So that was then that's the image essentially I decided to start editing. Now, in my head, I had this idea of portal, maybe sort of weird lightning trails or some kind of swirly water drop effect or even flames, and then a hint of another world beyond it. And I spent, I don't know how many hours or even days in Photoshop desperately trying to get the effect I wanted. And it just wasn't working. I don't know whether it's just lack of skills of what I had or just trying to put the wrong thing in. Everything I put in just looked really false. I just couldn't get the effect I wanted. And I was getting to a point whereby I was ready to just abandon the idea. And then one night, just heading for bed, suddenly I had the idea pop into my head. What if it was a giant book? So I thought, well, okay, that could be really interesting. What if we put a book in this place? How would I do that? So then what I had to do basically was take a photo of a book. And so I did that separately. So this is like the first, the sun was coming in through the window. You can see my reflection in a mirror in the back here. I stuck a book on a stool to take a photo of it. Now, interestingly, although it was relatively randomly picked off the shelf, the book ended up being The Borrowers. Some of you might know the children's story of The Borrowers. Those who don't, it's about tiny people who live under the floorboards, and it's beautiful stories. And somehow, actually, that seemed even more in keeping that you would have a giant book, and it also kind of then makes it seem like the people within the picture. Could they be borrowers themselves? Now, the problem with lighting this was really what I wanted was a kind of a backlight on the book coming through, but of course the spine is in the way, so the words themselves ended up just kind of in shadow. So what I ended up doing was setting up a flash to bounce, to shoot the light into the book, and then you can just about see up here, you might be able to, I don't know, there's a little bit of tin foil hanging over the back, and what I've got is tucked inside the book. I've got a little bit of tin foil so that when the flash hit it, it sort of bounced some of that light back up so that the light didn't fall into shadow on the page itself. So if we go back then to this then being the final image, you can see that what I did was into the gap where the softbox had gone, I was able to Photoshop the book in, brighten up the light a little bit. Again, I suppose if we go to, so you can see then a sort of direct comparison between, that's the unedited version, that's the edited version. So as well as brightening it up and putting the book in, you can also see that what I've done is I've curved the bookshelf. I noticed on the original here, because I'm using a wide angle lens, the edges get distorted a bit, and this already over on the left, the bookcase was starting to curve in a bit. So what I did was I exaggerated that in the editing process, and it kind of gives you a feeling almost like you're looking through one of those little peek holes like you have on a door in a motel or a hotel or something like that, you know, you can kind of see out. It's sort of almost, it's not quite fisheye, but it's sort of veering towards that, so it gives you that idea of like you're peering into another world. And then this can be read on multiple levels. My model there, Sarah, and her daughter. Sarah's wonderful. She's a printmaker. Sarah Makes Prints, I think, is her Facebook or Instagram page. I'll tell you what I will do. I will drop her web address into the comments at the end of this, or if you're watching on the YouTube version, I'll put it into the description part. What I'll also do is put a link to the open book in Wigtown as well, so you can go and check that out. But yeah, so you can kind of, you know, what I love about creating these kind of photos is the questions they kind of you know, you're looking at it, you're thinking, well, who is she? Why is she? Look, what's the giant book doing there? The little girl in the background that you don't necessarily notice at first, but then you see she's sitting under a lampstand, and you know, is this woman here in front of the book part of her imagination? It's another way of reading it. We'll just say that as the other part of the lighting system with this, which if we click back here, that orange light above the girl's head is actually another off-camera flash tucked into the lampstand. The light itself just wasn't bright enough. It was completely overpowered by the flashes that were inside the softbox. So as well as having the one, you know, a powerful flash inside the softbox, I also put one inside the lamp. There wasn't a light bulb in there, and I put a little orange gel over the flash, so that's what's giving that lovely kind of orange glow within that. So that's pretty much the story behind that one. What I'll do now is I'll flick over, take a look at the comments, and then I'll show you one other photo that I did with the giant softbox and this same bit of book shelving in a minute. So just close those and flip back over. So what have we got here? Right, okay. Stacey says, where do you get a softbox that large? I never see anything that large. Do you rent? No, I didn't rent. I mean, straightforwardly online. I can't remember, quite possibly Amazon. But no, you can buy softboxes from all over. Yeah, I think it was Amazon I got it. But, you know, there are plenty of other camera stores. Just type in large softbox, see what you get. And it's a lovely one, this one. It really is. It's like I said, it's about 6 foot tall. And it's so big, you can climb in it, which I'm actually going to come on to in a minute. So yeah, just start searching. Stacey's also very familiar with the story of the borrowers. So what else? Oh, Jackie says a 24/7 passion for sure. I don't know whether that's in response to something. Maggie says, love the bending of the shelves. April says the final piece of the book is great, thank you. Stacey enjoyed reading the book, and Jackie loves the fisheye and smoke. Sandra says, really interesting how you photographed the book. I would like to know how you inserted the book into the main image. Well, that's a lot of mucking around in Photoshop, to be honest, Sandra. I don't know that I could show you quickly how to do it. It's really no. I'm just about to go and see if I actually could, but to be honest, no, it would take that long that half the podcast would disappear before we even knew what was happening. So no, yeah, I maybe another day, on that one. Okay, what else have we got here? Shashi says nice water glass. Okay, not entirely sure what you're talking about there, Shashi. Michelle says looks really magical. Stacey says, oh my gosh, I believe it. That is something to see. And Becca says, would using a fisheye lens distort the image too much to get that bend? Quite possibly, because what I really wanted, I wanted the people in the centre to still look relatively normal. I didn't want them bent and distorted. I just wanted the outer edges bent and distorted. And I think a fisheye tends to start distorting pretty much from just a small part. You know, you've got to be dead centre, that bit won't be, and almost everything else starts distorting out. So it might be overkill, but the reality is actually, Becca, I don't have a fisheye lens, so I don't absolutely know on that one. I think if I'd had one, I would have given it a go, but I don't. But I was using a wide-angle lens, a 10 to 22mm lens, and I've got it at a 10mm, so as wide as I can get it. And that, so like I said, it started to distort, and then I accentuated that in Photoshop. Cool. Right, okay, so, yeah, but what I want to show you, what I was saying about that softbox, though, is that softbox was actually big enough to climb in. And so, also, one of the big people helping me out there was Anne Barkley, who, she sort of essentially is in charge of Wigtown Book Festival, running it, making sure everything gets done, organising, amazing person with an amazingly organised brain who manages to get Wigtown Book Festival running every year despite everything that gets thrown at her. Anyway, she was helping out with this shoot, and so I say, well, look what you can actually kind of climb in this. So what I did was I had this sudden idea. I just wanted to try something out, and so you can see here what I did was I turned the softbox sideways then, pointing it into, and I said, look, go in. And because of the kind of the material, the diffusing material, if she's placed her hands on the diffusing material, but the flash is going up. There's two flashes in there, one either side of her, and you can see the hands and you can see a bit of shadow, but you can't see the rest of her. Almost as soon as anything that kind of comes away from the material then becomes virtually invisible, although there might be shadows. So I thought, well, okay, that's kind of it. So then I said, well, okay, create shapes, and you should create a bunch of shapes and sort of press yourself up against the to sort of see what would happen. And we ended up with this wonderful, wonderful shape. And at this point, I've got this half idea of, okay, now if we're talking portal to another world, we could create something where it looks like, something's trying to break through. Only what I had to do was then, I needed two things I decided to do. First of all, I would need to do a more cinematic crop. And the other thing is I would need to get rid of these black edges of the softbox and sort of white it out so it looks like a light. And in the end, the picture I did was this. And that's a lot of fun. It's a very kind of cinematic crop. And it really does look like somebody sort of trying to come through from some kind of other dimension. And that's the great thing about a bookshop. A bookshop can be anything. I mean, the books are, they are portals to other worlds. They are thoughts and ideas. I mean, in the same way photos can be. And it's storytelling, and it's a bookshop. A bookshop, it could be a place for a murder mystery. It could be you could be. It's almost timeless. I mean, well, not completely timeless. You can't quite do Romans in there, but anything sort of from Victorian times onwards, you could, Edwardian, World War One, two, 60s, 90s, turn of the millennium. You can put anything into a bookshop. So, and you can go fantasy land, and it doesn't seem out of place because books are entrance to another world. So that was another fun one. Now, there are other shots I did here as well. Again, I could be here all night talking about them, so I won't at the moment. I just wanted to introduce you to a couple of these ideas, that what you can do with a large softbox and a second-hand bookstore. Sky's the limit, really. So, okay, that's really what I wanted to tell you about that. So let's just close those and come back and see what other comments we've got. Okay, Robert saying thank you to lots of people who are wishing him happy birthday. Right, Rosie says the hands are spooky, great portal. And where are we? Sandra says really creepy image, but I like it. Stacey says, could you use a diffuser of the same size? I do like the artistic touch that makes the image of the hands. It makes it spooky. So could you use a diffuser of this? Yeah, I mean, basically, if you can. I mean, the main thing is if you've got a diffusing sheet is keeping it steady. The advantage of the large softbox is that it's got a kind of frame to it, and it just sort of, you can, because it's this thick, you can stand it upright and it sort of stays upright under its own weight. But no, you could set up anything. I mean, you could create any kind of frame, put some kind of material across it, and play with it. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Inga's here. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm late. Yeah, Inga's doing the equivalent of sort of coming into the room, coughing, everybody standing up and shuffling to one side as she squeezes past and sits down. Becca says, that's amazing. It almost looks like a silhouette of a face too. Stacey says, our photo club had a challenge this past week, which was reimagining a movie. Yeah, well, movies, absolutely. It's this endless ideas. So you pick a movie, pick an idea and start creating. It's one of my favourite things to do. Very often when I'm sitting down with clients to start talking about a shoot or trying to generate ideas, I will say, do you have a favourite movie or TV programme or something like that? It gets the ideas bouncing, and then you start to find from that your client is then, maybe they're more drawn to science fiction, or maybe they're drawn to period drama or whodunits and or gothic horror, and these ideas then or what they're drawn to then become your starting points for, well, could we create an image in that style? And it's huge amounts of fun to be had with that. Okay, and Becca says, has an abstract quality. I really love it. Cool. Okay. So, Inga, I'm afraid you'll need to rewind and look after the... go back and watch the repeat, rewind to the beginning to see the photos that I've been discussing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is move on to the critique section. So we've had 4 critiques put in. And right, sorry, one sec. Oh, sorry, I've lost the page I was looking at. Right, okay. So we've had 4 pictures put in, and just a little reminder and certainly for those who are new or fairly newish here. We're now on to the critique section, and the critique section is your opportunity to send a photo in to get some kind of feedback on it. It might be, well, the basic problem that we all have with critique is we create photos, we are far too close to them. And it makes objective judgment of them extraordinarily difficult. When we look at a photo, we remember all the thoughts we were having at the time we took it. We remember the smells, remember the noises, remember the interruptions, we remember the 400 other photos we took at the same time that we thought were terrible and weren't worth editing. We then edit them, and we get to a point we're so close we don't know whether they're any good or not. We put them online and our friends say, yay, it's wonderful, and we go, oh well, that's good, but how do we really know? Because some of our friends will say, yay, it's wonderful, just because they're being encouraging, which is lovely. That's what friends should be doing. Except our friends aren't necessarily the obsessive, passionate photographers that we are. So they might not necessarily know whether it's any good as a photo. So this idea of how do you get good feedback, how do you get a bit of feedback on your images, is really difficult. So part of this corner of the internet, what I wanted to do with this corner of the internet, is to create a space whereby you can send your images in and let me know where the struggle was, where the kind of sticking points are with the photo. You know, were you having problems with the light? Were you having problems with the composition? Were you having problems with the camera? Whatever it is, let me know when you so go to the Facebook group Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. If you've not already joined, join it, submit your image, and let me know where your sticking point is, where the problem is, what kind of feedback you would like, and then at the following podcast I'll do my best to try and help out. So what I'm going to do now is move on to some of the pictures. Now I know VG couldn't be here tonight. She's taking her father along to get his vaccine tomorrow, and they've got like a 7 o'clock start, and given that because she's in India, it's 1 o'clock in the morning when we even start here. She needed to get some sleep. So, but she has put in some pictures. So basically, I'll just show you kind of what she's been up to. She took this photo with her ordinary camera and a kit lens, trying to play around with that notion of capturing a droplet. She then got hold of, for a day, a macro lens, and set about spending all day photographing, trying to get these kind of photos. So here you can see sort of the crown droplets kind of coming up, lovely little kind of crown, and which is cropped. This one here, you can see the reflection of it rather beautifully as well. This one, there's quite a bit of blur to it as well, but sort of a motion blur to it, and I think this is partly coming out of getting the right level of flash ambient light shutter speed, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Here's another one, and here's another, which I really do quite. I think there's a lovely, much more of a sharpness to this one, and some great droplets shooting about the place. So these are the kind of photos that VG's been playing with, and so to read to you what she put. She said, so this weekend tried out water drop photography. I tried them with a kit lens and then the macro. Lots of scope for improvement, but it was a really exciting day. From the morning until 4:45 in the afternoon, she had to return the camera and lens by 5 o'clock. I did not part with the camera except to cook, eat and sleep. Guess it would take another day or two to get accustomed to the macro too, since the flash was also new. Struggled, but kind of getting comfortable towards the evening. Challenges while using the macro lens. And oh yeah, I then asked her, so what kind of feedback was she hoping for? So she said that the challenges were using the macro lens and how to better use it. She's also confused between using the shutter speed and the external flash. Does the flash impact the shutter speed or vice versa? Okay, so there's a kind of whole number of things here. Now, actually, chances are, I don't know for certain, but I would guess maybe Jackie actually knows even more about it. Because I mean, with Jackie, if you remember the photo she put in before with the slices of lemon dropping into the water, catching the splashes. However, there are a couple of things to remember, VG, when you're shooting. First of all, when you're shooting with a macro lens, is because it's kind of zoomed in, your depth of focus, your depth of field, is much narrower. So if you get this bit in focus, that bit's going to anything outside of that is going to go out of focus very quickly. So if you're wanting the whole droplet in focus, you've really got to narrow down your aperture to get a wider depth of field. It's the kind of thing where you sort of start at f8, but you maybe go to f11, maybe even f16 or something like that to try and maximize the depth so you get as much of it in focus as you can. So you've got that problem straight away with the macro lens, is that the depth of focus is automatically narrower than it is on maybe certainly a wider angle lens or something like that. Now, the other thing you talk about is the notion of the flash and the shutter speed. Now, basically, when you are, this is again a little bit technical for a moment, if you think the aperture controls the amount of light coming in from the flash, your shutter speed kind of controls the amount of ambient light you've got. So if you, in a way, it doesn't really matter if you have your shutter speed at a 50th of a second or 250th of a second. It won't actually make any difference, the amount of light kind of coming in through your lens. The flash goes off, and the flash is going faster than the lens is than your shutter speed. So your shutter closes and opens, the flash has gone off, it's gone in. Now, what that means is because your shutter speed isn't making that much difference to how much light is hitting the flash, what it really is making a difference to is the ambient light. If you have a slower shutter speed, more of the outside light comes in. If you have a faster shutter speed, less of the outside light comes in. And when you're doing something like droplet photography, you really want it so that if the flash didn't go off, it would appear to be completely dark. So you speed up your shutter speed to a point whereby if the flash doesn't go off, when you go click, it's pretty much black. And then if you turn the flash on, then everything that's lit is only being lit by the flash and not by the ambient light. The problem is that if it's lit by the ambient light and the flash goes off, and if you've got a slower shutter speed, you will capture some of it, but other parts of it will appear kind of smeared as such. And in a way, that's kind of what happened, I would guess, with something like this one, where we can see the droplet and we can see the movement in the water, but we can also see the outline of it as well. So whereas it looks like by the time you got to this one, you've captured it much more sharply. So although there is still sort of bits of blur around as well. So, however, your aperture is the amount you're widening up for the light to get in and hit the sensor. So if you have a wider aperture, everything you hit will be brighter. If you have a narrower aperture, everything will be darker. So what you're trying to find the ultimate balance for is you want a fairly narrow aperture, because A is going to make everything more in focus, and B, it stops the flash being overpowering. But the problem is because it's a narrow aperture, you then still need to get enough light in, so you then need the flash going off as well. It really is one of those things where you have to play. You have to you start with one setup and then start tweaking. But start with a narrow aperture. ISO, you really sort of start at something like 400, but maybe go to 200 or 100 if too much light is getting in. And then set your flash for half power or quarter power, and then start playing with that. And then really it's a case of experimenting. Keep experimenting until you end up with the combination of light that you feel works best for you. And then start playing with the way you're dropping the water to create the different effects. Feels a bit messy, but I'm hoping that I've got part of that across to you. Okay, right. Let's flick back. Okay, I'll close those, see if anybody else is actually saying anything. Um, okay. Jackie says would love to try it out sometimes. Stacey says I have a Photo Quest image due for Photo Club for motion. I'm playing with water movement. Streams are one, but this is a good idea. Hey Jackie, you are the expert for composite. I'm trying to learn. Pat says that's real dedication, VG. So yes, I mean the VG is one of the, well, it's kind of what I was talking about last week. Is I think, or the point I was talking about last week is we're not just photographers. We kind of get obsessive with this kind of thing, and I'm sure a lot of the people who are watching this will have found themselves sort of diving into something for hours and hours on end, desperately trying to get the photo. Okay, so and Maria is also saying she'd like to learn more about you, from Jackie as well, I think. Jackie says composites are super fun. You can be really as creative as you want. All right. Oh, okay. There's a whole conversation going on with Jackie at the moment about composites. Yeah, I mean, a composite is where you're taking one image and you're laying it over another. And then the question is with your editing, how convincing can you get it? Sometimes you put composites and they look fairly obvious, and it's a little bit like collage where you can cut a person out of a magazine and you can put them on a picture in a background and it's been stuck on, and that's fine because that's part of the style of it. Other composites are where you essentially try and edit in such a way that you can't see the join. And I suppose that's kind of what I was trying to do with those bookshop photos, which is where it sort of blends in, so you're not looking at the edit, you're looking at it kind of convinced by it, that you might believe that there is a giant book there, or you might believe there is a bit of a portal to another world, rather than thinking, oh yeah, but I can see the join. If you can see the join, the edit hasn't worked, unless you've deliberately stylistically gone for that. Right, okay. So next thing I want to talk about then is Benito, sorry. Now, this is a sort of slightly, right, hold on a sec. I think actually Ben has left an extra comment in the group, so I do just want to quickly check that. Okay, so Ben's answering one of the questions that I put in, so just needed to double check that. Oh, actually, Ben has just come in with droplet shot. Says wide lens. You can start f8 as that gives you a good depth of field, and then as Kim says, eliminate the ambient light and control the flash. Yeah, I suppose wide angle lens can work as well. And actually, yes, wide angle lenses don't tend to have that squashed in depth of field quite so much. I guess it all depends on the lens you've got. The problem is with the wide angle lenses, you tend to need to get in closer if you want to only capture the droplet. And then of course you've always got the problem of splashing the lens as well. But again, that's something you need to play around with. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about Ben's photo. So where are we? So basically, Ben sent me this photo. This is the unedited version, and then this was the final edit. But what he also did was in the group, he put in little kind of diagrams of what he's actually been doing with in terms of dodging and burning and lighting it all up. So I'll read a little bit about what Ben said. He said, here's an image taken during downpour along the path at the back of beach huts. I shot this in black and white. I took my inspiration of my editing from, and I'm going to mess up how I pronounce this, Takiji Iwamiya. Japanese photographer from Osaka, especially his Sado Island works. I wanted to place the horizon at the bottom of the figure, so use rule of thirds to do that and crop the image to 10 by 8. I then burned the sky to bring out a little bit of detail from the cloud, maybe a touch overexposed, however thinking using the lack of detail creates contrast with the details elsewhere. Okay, so he then goes, Ben then goes on to sort of talk quite in depth about the different aspects he's either highlighted or burned down, brought details out the highlights, or how he's sort of darkened highlights or lifted shadows and kind of done dodge and burn with it. So part of this, though, was, I suppose part of the question here was, I wasn't totally sure, really, Ben, what it was you wanted out of from me. The decisions that you made are perfectly sensible. I mean, I could quickly drag this picture into Photoshop, but I don't know that I would really necessarily do anything that you hadn't already. Kind of what I was interested with this was, I wanted to kind of know more the story behind what it was you did. And in fact, that's the bit that I was just checking just now, which you answered. Because one of the questions I wanted to know was, was this a setup shot? As in, you happen to know the person, you went out there in the rain, you wanted to get the puddles and the droplets, and you asked the person to move ahead, took a bunch of photos, and then went off for a cup of coffee somewhere. Or was it opportunist? You happened to be out, you saw the figure, realised that there was a possibility, and then sort of dropped down, took the photo. And that's what you're telling me you did in your answer in the message that I just looked at, which is fast thinking, which also makes me think you only tend to think of that because you've tried it before and it didn't work, and now the idea is in your mind as an opportunity. So you saw the opportunity and went for it, which is great. Most of us, when we see the idea, it's rare for us to get it right the first time. Usually something's gone wrong, and but the idea embeds itself, and then we kind of go out afterwards to, or if the opportunity occurs again, we tend to be much more on the ball about getting it. And it's a lovely photo. I mean, I love the water droplets. It's going to carry on a bit from VG really, but caught the rain coming down heavily. Oddly enough, with this, my first feeling when I saw it was almost like, well, I want to kind of straighten the horizon. I want to tilt it a little bit. But actually, then I looked at it and I thought, no, I don't. I really like that sort of slightly off camber tilt to it. It just sort of adds that little bit of energy to it. Any more than that, and I think it would have felt a bit odd. But I think that actually works for it. I suppose really the kind of interesting thing is there's the okay, Ben says I got wet knees. I bet you did. We suffer for our art. I suppose really though it brings home this idea that what makes the photo interesting is the story, or it can be. I mean, yes, you can have a photo on its own and you can like the photo or not like the photo. It can remind you of somebody else's style, or your sense of does it work or not is based on this Japanese photographer's style that you've seen. You're trying to emulate that, take some of those ideas mixed in with some of your own, create your own version. And then you've taken that photo and then you've edited it in the way that you wanted to edit it so that you're happy with the results. And at that point, I don't think there's a lot more I can tell you. Anything I say really becomes either praise, yay, well done, pat on the back, which isn't really critique, or it becomes, well, I would have done it this way, which then isn't the way you wanted to do it. But I think the real thing it's kind of what I found myself really interested in was the story behind it. Why did you want that photo? Did you also the idea, was it originally done in colour, and how you might have edited it from that point further back down the line. Because in the end, I mean, photography is storytelling. It's one of these things I've talked about quite a lot, and I think is a really important aspect, is that the difference between a snapshot and a photo which is engaging is the narrative, is that sense of storytelling. And what makes storytelling is the sense that there's something more than just what you're seeing. It's hinting at something bigger than. It's hinting at stuff that's going on out with the dimensions of the photo, whether that's what's maybe happening just off to the left or to the right of the photo, or what's happening behind the photographer, or to time. What happened just before that photo was taken? What happened just after that photo was taken? What happens? What are the ideas and things that are going on around it? And it's the story of the, when we look at a photo and we start wondering these things, this is where I think that photos then have so much more power to them, so much more interest. They grab our attention and hold on to our attention because we're asking questions, we're imagining, we're putting something of ourself into it. So I suppose if nothing else, then your photos allowed me to kind of reiterate that. But like I say, as in terms of how I might have done things differently, well, the thing is, like I say, I think you've already made the decisions you wanted made. I think if I made, you know, if I for example, I might say, well, actually, I fancied a dark and stormy sky. So I might, because that wasn't possible to pull out of the highlights because of the settings you had in the camera, I might have then photoshopped in another sky. But then if I did that, that would have taken away from that simplicity aspect that you were after. So there is a thing here whereby I think you can judge that photo by how well it matches up to what you were chasing. And if you were chasing and you feel that you've got it, then you've got it. If there's a bit where you say, actually, I'm not totally sure about whether it's the composition, the light, the sky, the whatever, then at that point, if you want to let me know, then I think I can maybe, you know, I can try and give you alternatives. But, you know, I mean, yeah, it's a good photo. You've made the decisions that you felt were right for it. So I don't think there's much more I can tell you about that one, Ben. But thanks for putting it in. I mean, it's an interesting photo, and I will go and look up that. I'll go up and look up that Japanese photographer. Just will say that if anybody is already attached to the group, if you go and check out the photos in the Facebook group that Ben's put in, you'll at least be able to find the right spelling to copy and paste into Google. Okay, cool. Where are we at then? And Sandra said she liked the drama of that photo. And where are we? April said, I love the feel of the way the person away in the distance. What have we got else here? So Ben saying very opportunist shots. Stacey says, I can actually feel the photograph. It feels like a mystery, but it's also sad. A lone walker. You can just see the tail. So Ben says he's trying to do more street art and imagery lately due to lockdown. Had to be more opportunistic. I mean, being opportunistic out in the rain, especially, is heavy rain as well. Hopefully you've got a waterproof camera or a big umbrella. Jackie also says she's trying to get out to, but it's a bit more difficult at the moment to do street photography. Cool, right, okay. So let's move on. I'm going to move on now to Roy. And where are we? Let's find Roy's photo. And flip across. So, Roy said... so, now actually, Roy actually put this in not this week, but last week when we were doing the minimalism challenge. And he said, as I only joined the group a few weeks ago, I've been looking at earlier episodes on YouTube. Yeah, and yes, he has subscribed. Which actually, let's just point this out, that youtube.com/Kim Ayres. So you can find all the prior episodes on YouTube, the other 49 before this. If you go to YouTube, do subscribe, click the little notifications bell, and like it as well. Let YouTube know that these videos are worth watching. So anyway, back to here. And Roy says, I just watched episode 6. That's a long way back. The Undefended Hour. And it reminded me of a shot I took in earlier life on film. I've copied this using my DSLR, a first for me, and I'm not unhappy with the result. Obviously not for tonight's theme, which was the opposite of or last week's theme, which was about minimalism. But at some point, your comments will be very welcome, and maybe some thoughts on the copying technique. I've dug out 12 prints from the same era that I intend to copy. Trip down memory lane, a good time to do something to do while I'm stuck indoors. Well, okay, first of all, I'll just talk a little bit about this photo. Now, the Undefended Hour, episode 6, the main thing about that is it's got quite a kind of film noir, femme fatale feel to it. So this one here would probably have been quite good for the previous challenge of still life, actually. Lots of different bits on it. We've got a phone off the hook, got an overturned vase, there's a bit of money on the lying on a thing, there's some more money down here, cards, or what looks like a letter opener but with blood on it, an inkwell, keys, and most mysteriously, help me, and a little line running off it. Oh, and the phone is also unplugged. Okay, and there's a picture on the side there. So there's a whole kind of composite thing put together, which is sort of stirring up that idea of mystery or murder mystery or kidnap or something like that. So you've obviously put a lot of thought, Roy, into the objects you wanted to have and how to place them around. Now you've got sunlight coming through the window, and it's kind of coming through the net curtains, creating some interesting little kind of light and shadows. But really, I think one of the things you really want to think about with this, if you want to kind of accentuate that idea, is if you're talking film noir, femme fatale, you're going that kind of cinematic thing. Well, then that's what you need to do primarily is, I think you need more contrast with the blacks and the black and white. So if I just, I'll open this with Photoshop in a second, just kind of show you loosely what I mean. Another thing I'd be tempted to do is maybe again go for a slightly more cinematic crop. There's a lot of up the top part of the net curtain which isn't really necessarily adding much. So if you kind of brought that down a bit to just above where the light is, could maybe. No, I don't know. I won't take anything off the bottom because you've got a drawer handle there, which is maybe part of it. Now, at that point, you could also maybe have widened it a little bit. If you stood back, taking a slightly wider shot. Now, I'll use the content-aware fill here, which won't do a brilliant job, but it just gives us a sense of. You can see that you get that sort of slightly more cinematic crop to it, which I think feels more interesting if you're going for that. And then. I think if I'll just quickly go into camera raw filter here because it allows me to do a couple of things more quickly. If I go to the optics and I create a bit of a vignette and just sort of darken down the corner a little bit so that it's not too bright at the edges, because what you're trying to do is bring people back into the middle of the photo. But then, okay, let's go back to camera raw because I came out a bit too quickly. And then what I was going to say is really what you want to do, I think, is play with the contrast. So if I take the contrast and now that's maybe taking it a little bit too, we're losing some of the darks here. So what I might also do is bring the shadows up a little bit, the highlights down a little bit, and then use this clarity button, which kind of, that kind of deepens the contrast a bit more, but a little bit more selectively. And I think, and then play with that contrast maybe a little bit more, something like that. And now the person in the picture has maybe gone a little bit dark. You could mask that and just maybe sort of set that opacity for sort of, I don't know, 40% or something like that, and just bring a little bit more of that back out if you wanted to sort of keep the person in there. But I think then what you're really talking about then is the difference between that and then this. I think if you're trying to get that idea of moody black and white, then you need to have that contrast between the black and white. And I think in your original photo, Roy, whilst there is light and shadow coming in, there's not a lot of contrast between, you've got a stream of light coming across the table here, but it's not sufficiently different to really grab the attention. Whereas if you come now look at this, now we're much more aware of, you can see that light crossing the help me sheet. We now also see the patterns of light hitting the four aces up in the corner there. So by and large, I would say if you think about film noir style, it's always the blacks tend to be quite dark. The shadows are heavy, they're black, and they tend to be quite strong lines. Often a lot of strong diagonals as well. But think about more in the way of contrast. So hopefully that gives you some ideas to play with, Roy. Okay, I'll just do a quick flip back and see if there's any comments, and then I'll just give you a couple of hints and tips about photographing. Ben says, reminds me of an album cover. Pat says, I like the contrast of the suburban net curtains and the mayhem below. Yes. John says, help me, shot feels slightly too busy, like the more contrast. Rosie said, would you class the original as high key? Not really. I don't think I would, Rosie. I mean, although it's not bright. There is lots of shadow and there's lots of detail in it. I think if we go back to the original and I drag the curves up like that, then that becomes much more high key, I think. Now, how far up you take it before you start losing the detail is obviously one of those problems that you have. But I think the main problem with that is the high key is then out of keeping with that notion of a potential murder scene and the mayhem and what have you. So the other way you go is you go low key, you make it darker. But again, we've got problems with potentially losing too much in the way in the shadows. And really that kind of sunlight on the net curtain doesn't fully suit low key either. So I don't know, playing with the contrast, I think you've got to just make sure there's more contrast between the shadows and the highlights. So, Roy says, I do like the contrasted version. Thanks. Okay, glad that was useful. And Jackie says she enjoys the story and that the image is creating and it gets you thinking. So that's cool. Okay, now the next thing Roy wanted to know was about the idea of photographing old photos. Essentially, how do you digitize? A lot of us have got albums full of images, maybe in literal physical photo albums that are taking up shelves and shelves of space. And maybe we even, whether it's we want to share them with relatives, send them to the grandchildren, have a digital version of them. Are there any things you need to keep in mind if you want to sort of, now there's a couple of ways you can get it. You can get a flatbed scanner, put them in. You can have a slight problem if you've got glossy prints with that or silk prints, because the light of the scanner will also reflect on the surface and that might create distortions. The main key things for photographing photos. Okay, I made a couple of little notes here. So the first thing is a flat surface. Might sound obvious, but you'd be amazed. But the thing is what I mean is if you've got it on a flat table, if you've got your camera above on a tripod or extended whatever up, you want to make sure that it is exactly perpendicular to, if you've got a table with a slight tilt or the camera itself is at a slight tilt, then it's not going to be square. So you want to line it up so that the camera is focused right into the middle of the photo and that everything gets square. Tied in with that is the idea, avoid a wide angle lens. Don't go, because a wide angle lens is going to start distorting things. So ideally what you really want is more distance and zoomed in, depending on the lens that you've got. So rather than actually putting it on the table, you might be better off actually having, have a board on the floor and then have a tripod as high as you can kind of get it, pointing downwards, zoomed in then to the space that you want. Then focusing, don't have it on autofocus all the time, because the autofocus is going to kind of keep adjusting every time, and isn't necessarily reliable. What you really want to do is manually focus it, take a couple of photos, look in the back of the camera, zoom in, make sure that you are absolutely certain that it is in focus. And once you've got it in manual focus and you've got it exactly where you want it, you can leave it. You don't have to touch it again. As long as the camera and the photos stay at the same distance the entire time, they'll always be in focus. Having said that, also make sure that you have an f-stop which is giving you leeway. Don't go for a really wide aperture because that will give you a narrow depth of focus. So minimum f5.6, maybe a 6.3, maybe an f7, even an f8 gives you much more. So if there is a slight bend, if there is a sort of slight, cameras have a tendency quite often to focus just in front of or just behind where you think they are, you've got more chance of getting the photo in focus. And that then brings us finally to the notion of light. And what you've got to do, and this is the tricky bit, is really get an even spread of light. If you have, say you've got your pictures on the floor here and you've got a window here, the light comes in, but the light is brighter on one side than it is on another. So essentially you won't get a proper exposure of the photo. It will be, so you ideally want to have two lights, because the other problem that you've got, if you have the light, say you put a flash on top of the camera and had the light coming straight down onto it, is again, just like the flatbed scanner problem, you're going to get reflection. Most photos are not matte, most photos are either gloss or silk. So it will reflect the light back at you and create hot spots. So ideally what you want to have is you want to have two lights, two even light sources. If you've got off-camera flashes, you can do that. Or even if you've got two static lights that are of the same brightness, and have them at least a 45-degree angle to the picture, right? One here, so that both lights are coming and covering the area. But they're not reflecting directly up. Maybe if you can even do slight, 45 or below really is ideally, I think, what you want. But get an even spread of light across it where it's not going to be reflecting into the camera. So whether you want to rewind or go to the YouTube tomorrow afternoon, this will be up on YouTube. Go and pause and rewind this bit. But your main pieces of advice are flat and perpendicular to the camera. Make sure you've got a distance, that you've got a more of a zoomed in lens rather than a wide angle lens, that you've got a reasonable aperture setting to make sure you've got a depth of field that's going to cope with it. Manually set your focus, and make sure you've got an even spread of light. So hopefully then, Roy, that kind of gives you a sense of what to do. Failing that, Google it, and I'm sure you'll probably find plenty of people out there who have done similar things. But there's no real reason why you shouldn't be able to. If you can do that, and the main thing is about getting that light, and if you can do that, then yeah, you've got the time on your hands. Photograph your old photos. Obviously, if you're in an album with a kind of like a cellophane covering, you'll need to take them out, because that also will catch the light and bounce the light all over the place. But also, yeah, make sure you've got a 100 ISO, so you've got the cleanest image you can. So you don't want to make these old photos more noisy than they need to be. Right, okay, so where are we? Rosie says, last year I visited my sister and we went through hundreds of our father's slides using a projector onto a white sheet. We went through many childhood memories and I snapped away. Not marvellous quality, but still great to keep. Usually I use a machine to digitise the slides, but that was at home. With hard copies, I use a scanner and some success. I use a scanner with some success. Sorry, rambling. Ben says, good softbox diffuser. And he's saying to Rosie, I use an old bellows and a 50mm to copy negatives and slides. Yeah, so there's a lot of options out there. the setup I've given you is one. I think your biggest challenge is getting your spread of light. I can't remember, Roy, what if you're used to using off-camera flashes, then that's great. You again, yes, use the softbox, use diffusers, so you're not getting a hard light going onto it. Even bounce the lights off the walls or white card, but the main thing is you need to get an even spread of light. Okay, cool. Right. So on to final picture of the evening, which is from Robert. So happy birthday once again, Robert. And so Robert took a photo in Texas. Now, where are we? Suddenly pressed the wrong bit. Click on that and we'll flip over to here. So this was Robert's photo where he said, I took this photo in Texas a few weeks ago during our once-in-a-century winter storm. How would you have improved on the shot, on the subject, composition, or overall shot? So, okay, so part of what you've captured here, Robert, is there's this old phone box missing the phone. We've got wires coming out of it. We've also got rust and decay up above on the paintwork. We've got a reflection in the window of what looks like probably some kind of building, shopping centre, probably. We can see the snow in the car park. Over on the left, we can also see a little bit of snow on the ground and the bench there. Now, where you go next with this really depends on what it is that was really grabbing your attention, because there's multiple different things here. And I think there's the phone box is certainly part of it, but it actually feels like it's sort of, if it was really just about the phone box, then I think you could have come slightly straighter onto it and made it more of the picture. But I think really there's a slightly stronger sense here of it's kind of about decay. At least that's what I get out of it. And then there's an interesting sense of the reflection. Now, if the whole shopping mall was an abandoned one, and the buildings themselves are more decay, I think then that becomes really interesting as well. Now, the other thing is we can kind of part see through the window. I can see up here, there's obviously decay inside the building, but we can't see any further into it because the reflection kind of gets in the way as well. So once again, are you interested on the inside of the building or are you interested in the reflection? And I kind of get the feeling that there's a sort of sense here that you're trying to, there's sort of several ideas crowding in on you at the same time. So you've gone click and probably clicked several, and then this has been your favourite. But I don't feel it's really clear on necessarily any one topic. So you've got sort of several topics competing with each other. And I think that makes it a sort of slightly weaker photo because your eye doesn't really know where to rest. You get drawn to the red phone box, but then you're also really getting drawn to the reflection in the window as well. It's not complementing so much as kind of competing with it. So it's a bit of a tricky. Now, what you did do was you sent me the unedited version, which was this. And now, your edited version, you've boosted the saturation, a much clearer blue sky. In fact, is that a different? No, I think you've just drawn it out of what was there. Brighter red, and it looks much sunnier. Here, while there might still be a bit of sun, it's not quite so obvious, and it's a little bit more, feels more desaturated. And in a way, I think this photo kind of adds to that sort of sense of decay a little bit more, which, whereas this feels almost a bit too vibrant for it. It almost makes the phone box, the red of the phone box, sort of look a bit too freshly painted. Whereas this, you kind of get the feeling of it being much older. So let's just kind of drag this into Photoshop for a moment. Let's just close Roy's picture there. Now, there's also a bit here where, whilst in the background there's little bits of snow and what have you, I don't really think that's contributing much to it. I think what you're really talking. It's either the phone box, in which case you should have been round a little bit more, or it's about this reflection. I think there's a lot to do with the reflection here, and in that sense, what I really wanted to do was sort of move a little bit more to the right. So if we were to, and again, I'll use the content aware here, but if we were essentially to sort of move this further over, kind of forget that bit out the edge there, and just, so we were shooting it. It's turning the camera a little bit more to the right. Now, obviously, this is just filled in a background. But now you see what it does is it makes more of a feature of the reflection. And then the phone box kind of becomes like the support for. Now, I don't know really what this mall was like. If the mall was slightly decaying, certainly it's empty, there's no cars in it. But then that could be because the mall's closed because of COVID, or because it was winter and there was a snowstorm. I don't know. But then I think what you can also do is then play with the notion of the texture. So if what I do, if I take this into, no, not that, go into camera raw filter again, then what I'm really tempted, what I kind of want to do is I'll just up the shadows a little bit, down the highlights a little bit, which will allow me to take the clarity, sort of, you see, kind of selectively boost the contrast, and then the texture, and this kind of makes it much more in a kind of grungy kind of way. Now, normally it also desaturates it slightly. Normally what you might do is boost the vibrance, get a bit more color in there, but actually I don't want to. If anything, I wanted to kind of take that saturation and just knock it down a little bit, and desaturate it a bit more, which kind of adds again to that sort of sense of decay. So now if I click on that, do you see that I think there's it's a different interpretation. We go back to that, and then we come into this, and so I think so what we've got here is we can still see, if we want kind of inside, you've got all the kind of decay going up here. But what we've done is we've kind of made the most of the grunginess of the window as well. So the texture on the window that's come through the dirt and the condensation and the melted condensation and frozen and melted again and then running, adds to a grungy sense of almost like a textured overlay on the mall in the background as well, the buildings in the background. And then at this point, the phone box is now very much, you're aware of, there is no phone in it. The whole thing has this rundown decay feeling to it. So really what it comes down to then, Robert, is deciding, what's the most important, what's the story you're trying to get across? What's the most important part of this picture? If what you really liked was the phone box, then get in close, do a close-up of the phone box. If it's about decay, try and think, how can we create more about the decay? If it's about the snow, take 2 steps back, get in more of the background, get more snow in the foreground, and do about the snow. But I don't think it really was about that. I think that, but like I say, this is my interpretation again. And I suppose going back to kind of what I was saying with Benedetto earlier is understand your story. What story are you chasing? And if you know the story you're going for, then it makes all the decision processes afterwards much easier. If it's about decay, then you start, okay, how can I compose this photo in such a way that it emphasizes what bits of rust do I need to include? What bits of grunge do I need to include? And also what to filter out, what isn't important. Bright, fresh snow doesn't really say decay in the same way. Or is it about winter sunshine, in which case it's bright blue skies and bright reflections off the snow, in which case you need more in the way of snow in the picture. And I think the biggest thing we can do to improve our photography is to have this sense of what story do we want to tell. Every time you pick up the camera and you point it at something, there's a reason you pointed it. There's something about that scene that made you want to point your camera at it. And I think you want to try and get into the habit of verbalizing it. Say it out loud. If you've got a partner, fine, say it to them. If it's a really busy place, whisper it. But I think there's something actually about sort of literally mouthing the words. What is it about this photo I'm interested in? You know, I've got a bridge here. Am I interested in the shape and the line of the bridge? Am I interested in what the bridge is actually spanning? Am I interested in the decay and rust of the bridge? Or am I interested in the bright, shiny newness of it? Or am I interested in the way the bridge contrasts against the sky that's in the background? Am I interested in the way your eye gets drawn over to something on the other side of what the bridge is leading to? Or is it even something in the foreground of the bridge, so the bridge is acting as a background? All these things, once you kind of verbalize it, I think it helps tune your brain into knowing, okay, yeah, actually, if I'm really straight about this, what I'm really interested in is this. Or maybe there's 2 or 3 different things. But that's fine. You then just spend a bit of time on getting this one, a bit of time on that, and a bit of time on the other. And it sort of saves this sort of other thing, which is what we tend to do otherwise, which is machine gun approach. We just rapid fire, fill our memory card with as many photos as we can, and then hope we can figure it out when we get home. And then when we get home, we go through all the photos, find most of them don't really mean anything. And if we're lucky, we find 1 or 2 where we go, okay, that'll do. I'll tidy that one up a bit. But there's a difference between rescuing, which is what that is, and feeling like you've purposefully got a photo. You know, while you were there, you suddenly went, actually, what I really love is the grunge, is the colour, is the contrast, is the juxtaposition between these 2 items. Whatever it is, once you identify it, it then makes it so much easier for you to then go, now I understand that. What settings do I now need to put on my camera? What angles do I need to be at? What compositional techniques do I need? What lighting situation do I ideally want in order to emphasize that particular story? So, hope that helps, Robert. So let's flick back then, and let's close that and pull that back up. And okay, so what have we got here? Roy says I was in a conservatory with a glass roof. All right, that'll be where you were doing that. Okay, Pat says, I wonder where all the people have gone. Robert says, small town square. It was also minus 15 degrees centigrade, so I wasn't getting out of the Jeep. But I will go back and shoot this again. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'd be very wary about getting out the car if it's minus 15. It also likes to take on the processing and composition. Good. Ben says, like the old slide film look to it. Pat says, the story of lockdown. Stacey really likes the old phone box. Robert, replying to Pat, says the winter storm caused more isolation due to streets not being passable and multi-day power outages. And April says, I get the feeling of an old southern town getting rare snow. So there you go. You know, quite a lot of positive comments into that photo. So that pretty much brings us to the end of this week's podcast. Now, we've got the next 3 weeks, because the thing is, in 3 weeks' time, it is the anniversary edition. And to be honest, I haven't really thought yet what to do. I've got a couple of half ideas, but I'm open to suggestion. This is your podcast as much as it is mine. I mean, fine, I'm the one doing the podcast, but I'm doing it for you. It'd be quite nice, I think, to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of this podcast. So if you've got any ideas, then let me know. You know, if you've got an immediate idea, throw it in the comments just now. But otherwise, go to the Facebook page, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, and open up a little folder or file, you know, and just say, got an idea, I think this would be brilliant for your anniversary show. And I can take it into consideration, or other people can leave comments as well. And we can see if there's any kind of themes that start working their way forward. Because I think it would be quite nice to celebrate somehow. If nobody's got any ideas, I've got a couple of half ideas I'll maybe develop, but it would be nice if anybody else had any thoughts. Now, 2 weeks, what I thought I would do in the run up to that is we'll throw in another challenge. So in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to set the challenge for self-portrait. Now, I know that's going to make most of you run screaming from the room, but no, I'm going to have a bit of fun with this. I want to talk. So next week, I'm going to talk a bit about self-portraiture. Not just selfies with your phone, but the idea of using yourself as a character in a story. Not necessarily a self-portrait as in, I'm just looking for a nice likeness. But given the fact that we're still in lockdown, most of us, and we don't have many other people that we can photograph, how you can use yourself to kind of create characters, create story, and not worry about, do I look good in this? So next week then I'm going to do a section on self-portraiture. However, the critique section will be critique section as normal. So please, any photos you've got, any topic, any subject, put them in for critique for next week. This is your chance to get feedback. Just let me know where your sticking point is and I'll do my best to help. And then 2 weeks time. So then what I'll do is I'll set the challenge next week. Again, I'll talk through self-portraiture, do the critique section, set the challenge, and then in 2 weeks time we can see if anybody's actually entered it and go through the photos. That's pretty much it. Last couple of comments. Robert says 1 year anniversary could be show your growth as a photographer before and after. Well, that's certainly got ideas. Stacey says movie reimagined. Yep, can certainly do movie style stuff for self-portraits are a lot of fun. Okay, Jackie says, thanks so much, Kim. Much more fun watching live than the recording. We certainly need to celebrate the anniversary. So, excellent. Thank you very much for turning up. Thank you to everybody, to Ben, Robert, Roy and VG in particular for sending in the images and giving us plenty to chat about. For everybody who's commented and tuned in, and even you lurkers who have kind of turned up, not said anything but still watched. If you found these useful, would like to support these podcasts, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is the place to do it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you all next Tuesday. Take care. Bye-bye.